What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Cardio Book Review with your host, Jeff Rock. This episode, we are going to be reviewing Jobie Baldwin's INK. So I put the word out to some indie author groups on Facebook, trying to reach out to some indie authors to get some books to read for my cardio and to review them. And one of the first people to respond was Jobie Baldwin. And her book, INK, is an urban fantasy. And I was real excited to read it because I love urban fantasy. In fact, I wrote an urban fantasy and it's a lot more gritty than this. It's totally different, but I was excited to read it. And let me tell you, it did not disappoint. From the very first page, it had me hooked. Not only is the story rather good, it's really good, the writing is exceptional. The entire format, the way she writes, the way she uses descriptions, it's just incredible. And I was excited to do my cardio, I'll tell you that much, and I hate cardio, so anything to take my mind off, it helps. Alright, so let's get into the review. I got some notes down here, so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. I'm not ignoring you guys. So we start off, it picks up with the main character. The book starts in first person, and the main character's Christian Blake. And he starts talking about his family. He describes his father, the retired Colonel Blake, and his mother, who was a promiscuous flight attendant in the previous life before they got married. But they did get divorced, so it's a split family, and I'm pretty sure, in my opinion, that is an important development for the character. And we learn that Christian is pretty much like an outcast, and he dresses goth. He has piercings and dresses in a manner that is associated with goth. And his father absolutely despises it. You know, he's pretty straight-laced, and former military, so of course he's going to be. And the thing with Christian is he has disciplinary problems. He's disruptive, and I use that word for a reason, and he keeps getting into trouble in school, and he's been kicked out of several boarding schools. And again, that plays into the character development. So well written in this book, just exceptionally well done. The writing in this, I can't say that enough. The writing is just exceptional, and it just develops this character as an outcast, but not as a bad person. In the opening of the book, Christian describes having a lunch with his father that did not go very well. And as he left, he is walking down downtown London, and he discovers a tattoo parlor that he's never seen before. And this is where he grew up. He knows this area well. But for some reason, he's drawn to this tattoo parlor, and he makes his way inside to check it out. And again, this is where Jobie shines in her description. Walks in and describes the building as feeling cramped because of the low ceiling, but the entire walls are completely filled with all sorts of intricate tattoos. But the ones he's drawn to are Native American and these runes from Norse mythology. These runes, he's just drawn to them. And I kind of knew, because of the title of the book, INK, it has to do with some tattoos. So it all made perfect sense. I didn't know where she was going with it, but it all made sense up to this point. The next character we meet is a character named Raven. Now, she gets very descriptive in the way he looks and the way he carries himself, a very large person, big and overbearing and overpowerful. But the one thing that stuck in my mind was the description, a Native American motorcycle gang member. And that just gripped me, a Hell's Angel Native American. And I was just like, okay, I got it in my mind. I know exactly what he looks like. So this is also where the fantasy element really takes shape, is they get into a conversation about the tattoos and certain things like that. And Raven explains that the tattoos that he deals with, a person doesn't pick them. The tattoo picks them. And it was kind of confusing for Christian because, how does a tattoo pick a person? So Raven tells him to stand in the middle of the floor and close his eyes, and he'll know when it happens. So Christian does this and feels a little weird doing it, but he becomes overcome with these sensations, this dizziness, this weird feeling that he has, and it seems like time slows down, and he's dealing with this uneasy feeling for a long amount of time, minutes, hours, and then he collapses to the floor. But before he does, a vision is imprinted on his brain and his soul, basically, and he starts to come to, and he discovers that without Raven putting it on him, he's now got the tattoo already on his chest. The tattoo that he finds on his chest is a rune from somebody named Hagalaz, I believe is the way you pronounce it. From Norse mythology, he's known as a disruptor. And these runes, as Raven explains to us right here in this section of the book, Odin took all these uncontrollable forces in the universe and gave them runes as their conductor, as their being. And now with this rune on him, he's a human embodiment of Hagalaz. Hagalaz, I believe is how you say it. And he's known as a disruptor. Now, getting back to Christian, he's also a disruptive influence, and that's why he was kicked out of school. So she matched it very well, creating the character, describing the character, getting to know that character as being disruptive in getting into trouble, and this rune is known as a disruptor. Perfect matching. At this point, Christian's really confused. He thinks that maybe Raven drugged him or did something to him, and he explicitly says that he didn't drink anything, he didn't take any drugs, he didn't shoot up anything, so it wasn't him, but he believes that Raven did something to him and put the tattoo on him. He doesn't understand that it just went on him, that Hagalaz chose him and put the tattoo on him. So he's confused and angry, thinking that Raven just did this to him. Raven tries to calm him down and invites him in a back room so he can treat the tattoo and calm him down. And when he goes back there, Raven begins to explain a lot to him. It starts off with him explaining that there are this group of people called the Settlers. And the Settlers, unbeknownst to us but known in the story, are a group of aliens who came down to Earth decades ago, who established themselves as humans, and they wore disguises such as contacts and certain other things to be able to fit in more with the human society. And it wasn't until maybe 10 years ago, I think is what they said, that they came out and explained who they are and what they are. But at this point, they were already ingrained in society and became leaders of governments, the influential people, the rich, business. They're very ingrained and powerful people at this point. And in fact, there's a part of the book where there was an Oxford study done that explained that there was a certain group of people who were in charge, and once they found out that the settlers were aliens from another planet, then they put two and two together and figured out all these people have one thing in common, and they're settlers. But it was an overlooked study and nobody paid any attention to it. This next part is where Christian really had his attention taken, is that he's not the only one with this rune. Apparently there are several others who have this rune, and basically it is the runes, these powerful, uncontrollable forces of the universe, who know that there's something wrong with these settlers, and they are the protectors, and they're coming out choosing people to utilize their forces to deal with this problem and this threat to humans and to the universe. So Christian thinks he's the only one who's got this tattoo, this weird thing that's happening to him. But Raven explains there's several others, and there might even be more by this point, and that they're at a desert training facility training their powers to control their runes. And Christian's like, no, that's absolutely crazy. And Raven's like, come with me and be with your group, and we're going to deal with these settlers. And Christian says, nope, peace out, I'm leaving, and he leaves, and he goes home to see his mother. Now, Christian leaves and he goes to his mother's home, and it's described as this immense, great-sized mansion, sort of, basically. And he goes there, he announces that he's home and finds his mother painting a picture, her new obsession, and she basically ignores him. He talks to her and she just ignores him, saying that she's got to concentrate on the lighting to paint the picture because it's perfect lighting. And he says, all right, well, he's going to his friend's Ben's house. And she gives him some money and for food, and he leaves and he goes to Ben's house, picking up some food, some pizza beforehand, and going to his buddy's house, Ben, and they eat, and he tells him everything that happened with Raven. And Ben, unlike, somebody who you would really think that, somebody tells you something crazy like that, you're like, yeah, whatever, dude, But Ben totally buys into it, and he says he totally believes it because he thinks that there's something wrong with these settlers too, and he shows video of the new Canadian Prime Minister who is a settler. And they watch a video, and something about the video when he watches it makes Christian feel uneasy. And it's because he's a settler and because the Rune is starting to understand and they're working as one, and they know that there's something wrong with the guy. So throughout the next section of the book, Ben totally wants to find out what Christian can do. So he hands him a book and Ben rips it in half. He jumps over the bed completely, like 10 feet, and hits the ceiling, and totally Ben is excited. They go outside and Christian says, Ben says, I want to make it rain. So Christian's like, okay, rain. And it starts raining, but it's not just a little bit of rain. It's a complete, huge, destructive storm with lightning cracking part of the buildings and the ground and making craters and all sort of wind that blows him up in the air, and he has to fight against his Rune to make it stop. And once he gets a little bit of control, they go inside and the storm breaks, except it's still raining, but there's no more destructive forces going on. Throughout the night, Ben and Christian continue to search for how he can use his powers. Like I said, he ripped the book apart, and it describes him biting things and tearing things and destroying a metal cabinet and all sorts of things along that nature, but it culminates with him jumping off the 4th floor of the flat building to the ground unscathed. And by the end of it, Ben's like, look, you've got to go with this guy Raven. You have special powers. You got to deal with them, and you got to do what you're intended to do with them. And Christian finally agrees, and by this time it's rather late. I believe he jumped off the building, I think it was either 3 or 4 in the morning, and Raven told him to meet him at the train station at 9 if he was going to come with him. So at this point, Christian goes to sleep, but it's a very uneasy sleep. He has this dream of a settler girl, and he's never seen her before, doesn't know her, but in the dream, he feels like she's basically his soulmate. And he feels kind of guilty because he knows that the settlers are the enemy, but here he is basically with a soulmate as a settler, but it's only a dream, so he's not sure if it's a true thing or if it's just a dream that he's having because of everything that's going on. So Christian wakes up the next morning and he gets all his stuff together. He stops by his mom's house again to pick up some extra stuff, and as he leaves, he takes a family portrait for some reason and puts it in his back pocket. He's not even sure why, but he feels like he should take it. So I was like, all right, so that might come in handy a little bit later. I like the way she did that, even though his father doesn't approve of anything about him, and his mother's a flake who doesn't really seem to give him any affection. He still wants to keep this with them, and I thought it was a great piece, because when you come into real life, all kids want some sort of acceptance and love from their parent, even parents that they severely dislike or even hate or have never seen. They always want that acceptance from them, and I thought that was very good to put in there, just exceptional. Not that they put that part of the character in there more realistic than him just saying, forget it, I'm never going to see my family and I don't care. So he meets up with Raven and they go to the airport and they fly to Las Vegas of all places because Raven needs to meet with a guy named Jason Tilley to pick something up. And this is where Christian gets into a little bit of trouble. So when they get to Las Vegas, Raven gets a disposable phone, and gives a call to Jason Tilley and works out a meeting with him, but it becomes clear that it's not going to happen until a little bit later, a couple hours later. So at this point, they go to a casino and Raven says, I've got to go take care of some business. You do whatever you're going to do, and we're going to meet at the food court, grab some lunch, and then we'll go meet Jason Tilley. Well, Christian talks him out of a couple dollars to do some gambling because he's never gambled before. So he took the money and he goes to a row of slot machines, and he's got a couple quarters and he's getting ready to feed them. But then he feels and he remembers that he's got this rune, the Disruptor, and he wonders what he could do with the rune, but he decides, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use my power for evil. So he puts a quarter in it, but the rune takes over and spins all the slot machines in the row, and they all land on jackpots showing the exact same thing. Of course, this is going to get the attention of the security, which it does because they're all showing jackpots spilling out quarters. He's shocked and he's trying to collect them in cups, and people are gathering around cheering him, but the security knows something's going on. Of course, being Las Vegas, the security comes up. They're all wearing fancy gray suits, and they ask him to come with them. And of course, he knows he's in trouble. He thinks about what he could do to get away at this point, but he decides, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead. I don't want to cause any trouble, any more of a scene than I'm already causing. So he goes with them. And as he goes with them, they take him into the, into the back, take him to the back room. And they go through this long hallway and they go back to the security room, and he doesn't know what to do. He wants to escape at this point, but it's already kind of too late. And I finished up today's session as they're walking into the back room, and they meet a man who is a settler, and he is the boss. I can't freaking wait for tomorrow's cardio to read more of this book. I got in today's session, and I started off right where Christian is being brought into this back room by these two hulking security guys to meet the security guy in charge of the casino security, who happened to be a settler. And a very interesting exchange that takes place with the settler wanting to know how Christian manipulated the slot machines in order to win all three of them when he didn't even touch them. And Christian talks to him and tries to explain that he has no idea what happened, and the settler has the brutes beat on him a little bit to try to get some information out of him. And the strange thing is, Christian takes the beating, but it doesn't really affect him or hurt him in any way. Although he does bleed, he feigns that it hurts him. He falls to the ground, he moans, but in reality it doesn't really hurt him physically, and he can handle the abuse. While he's being questioned and he's not sure about exactly how he's going to get out of this situation, all of a sudden the steel metal security door gets knocked in by this little guy in a gray suit, somebody Christian's never seen before. Although he does notice something strange about him, some sort of glow enveloping him, and he figures that the other people don't notice that because they're not reacting. And the little guy, he claims to be somebody from the gambling commission, and that Christian was working with him to check their security. And I guess that it is believed by the settler and the goons because they let Christian go. And as they're walking out, Hagalaz, his rune, is setting off more slot machines as he's walking away, and I thought that was pretty cool. I like that. The rune is like, you know what? You mess with me, I'm gonna mess with you a little bit more. And I liked it. Once Christian and this little guy in the gray suit find their way out of the casino, Christian finally is like, who are you? What the hell's going on? And his form changes, and all of a sudden now, instead of little gray guy, it is Raven once again. And this is where Raven explains that he is part of the old group, the group before Christian and the others who have taken the runes recently. And he is a trickster, basically. Reminded me a lot of like the character Loki, like he can change things, he can make people believe things, he can convince them of things, and he can change his form and make people believe what they're seeing is real when he's just taking the form of something else. Now we move into a scene with a lot of action that I have to tell you, at the moment I was reading it, doing my cardio, I got a little bit angry at Jobie, and I was wording a response to her in my head, and I was gonna lay into her when I was finished with my workout today. But alas, it was for naught. So we pick up as they're leaving, and they're going to meet Jason Tilly to pick up this box, this mysterious box that Christian and we as the reader don't know what it contains, but it's obviously something important because Raven really wants it and he needs it, and he's setting everything up. And the entire idea of this box is the whole concept of why they're in Vegas anyway. So they continue down the strip, and and Raven takes the form of a police officer, and people are kind of staying away from him, and Christian kind of is uncomfortable because of his history and his and the way he has always been. He has this adverse belief and feeling towards authority figures such as police officers. So they're waiting, and all of a sudden this guy comes up, and it must be Jason Tilly because he starts talking to him. But then he explains that the box that he has to give Raven was stolen. He was mugged, and the box was taken from him. And as they're discussing the fact that it wasn't done by goons of the settlers, it was some sort of other group, all of a sudden a gunshot rings out, and bam, Jason Tilly's dead. And action just erupts at this point, where military-clad people who are settlers, and it's obvious from the way they look that they are settlers, start attacking them. And there's this major shootout, and Raven tells Christian to stay where he is, and he goes to deal with the issue because, of course, Christian doesn't know how to use his powers yet. And as Raven's going to do that, a settler comes over and is getting ready to kill Christian, which he uses his powers, and he promised that he wouldn't, but he has to because he's got to save his life anyway. And the whole scene is just very well written, very well balanced in my opinion, and shows Christian, who has no idea what's really going on, trying to do the best he can, and Raven, who is experienced in this whole battle that's going on with the settlers. And it's just such a action-packed, it was very well written, and it had me, I would say sitting on the edge of my seat, but it actually had me pushing a little bit harder on the elliptical machine so I could actually get to the meat. And it didn't help, but it had my blood pumping. And here's a little spoiler, and this is the part that had me heated about Jobie, and I was seriously ready to write her as soon as I got back and say, how dare you, which is a great thing for an author to know, because getting a reader to be that emotional about a character or an event in a book is something that we love. But spoiler alert right here, Raven gets shot gravely, and the way it was described in the book, I thought he was gonna die, and I was pissed, because I was looking forward to see the character Raven and see how it develops in the friendship between Christian and Raven, and to see where it was going to go. But then we discover that part of being one of the chosen, one of the runes, is they're basically indestructible and they live forever. They're immortal. And obviously it doesn't work that way, because otherwise the people who already had the runes there wouldn't be a need for another group, so they can't be immortal. But still, I thought he was gonna die, and I was pissed. But apparently he doesn't, and they work together in order to stop the attack, and they get away. And once they get away, they head out to the desert to their training site. Once we get to the training site, we meet a couple of other new characters, and one of them is a character named Zach. Zach is a huge, bulky guy, football player, American football, and he's from Georgia, so he's a southern boy. And he's the tribe's protector. His rune is like a big bear kind of thing with intricate tattoos and swirls, but his job is to protect the group. So he is able to extend out like a shield to protect everybody. And Key, who is almost the exact opposite of the southern guy. She's real small, dark skinned, and she's the healer. And her rune is like a white wolf who is very elegant, and she's able to heal and help heal injuries. And it's portrayed in the story where their trainer, I'm going to look up the name right here in just a second, cuts his arm, slices his arm, slices his artery, and she's got to help save him. And she uses her power, and Christian describes it as almost like painting her power onto the wound to help heal him so he doesn't die. And it's so well written that you can see it, you can picture it. It's almost like you're there watching. It's like just theater of the mind, just incredible writing through the entire book so far, and I thoroughly enjoy every aspect of everything I've read so far. So I just looked it up to make sure that I'm going to get the name right, and the trainer's name is Deshi, as from what I understand how to pronounce it, Deshi or Deshai. And he's a small Asian guy who doesn't have any special powers, but he has the ability to teach them how to meditate in order to get in touch with their rune, the god that they're embodying. And he teaches them to meditate in order to communicate, in order to use their powers in an effective means. But he also trains them on how to use their power. In fact, there's a scene where they're kind of playing around, and Christian Hagalaz kind of takes control and shoots a lightning bolt at Zack, and a plasma ball, lightning bolt, one of the two. And Deshi jumps in front of it and takes the impact completely on his chest. And he has no special powers, so all of a sudden now everybody thinks he's going to die, and they're hurrying to try to figure out what to do in order to help him, to save him. And Key kneels down and is able to literally reach into the hole in his chest, take his heart in her hand and fix him, and saves his life. And from there they may have a discussion where when they're training with their powers, Deshi has to be outside so he doesn't get killed, because he does have no special powers, so they take that precaution in order to ensure that he's safe. While they're doing all this training, Raven makes an abrupt departure and doesn't really tell anybody, and Christian's a little pissed off about it because he feels that he's leaving him with this group of people that he doesn't know and he has no connection with, and he feels sort of abandoned. But he soon discovered that these people are as close to family and friends as Ben was before he even took the rune as his tattoo. And he wonders what he's doing, because he hasn't gone through it before like the other ones did, because the other ones have known Raven for at least a couple weeks, and he has disappeared a few times. But he disappears because he's just like what happened with Christian. He's picking up the next person of the tribe. And I finished up today's session as he returns with the character that we learn his name is Pax. Now, I don't know the power, who embodies Pax or what's going on with Pax, but I can't wait to get into tomorrow to find out. And I just can't tell you. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of cardio, and I am looking forward to every day until I finish this book, doing my cardio and reading this book and finding out where this journey takes us. I freaking love this book. So today we met the new character in the group, in the tribe, Pax. Pax was taken over by the god Azus, I believe is how you pronounce it, who is known as a mouthpiece of the gods, which is interesting because Pax is a mute and he can't speak. However, when he touches people, he's able to use thoughts in order to communicate with the rest of the group and with other people. But we come to find out a little bit later, when Raven is gone, because, these guys are still outcasts and they don't really fully trust authority figures, he's able to send messages with his mind into the minds of other people. So the tribe is actually sitting down at some point, and they're actually having a conversation with Pax using his mental images to talk with the entire group, and the group is talking to him through speech. And it's pretty brilliant. I really like the way she played that, taking somebody who can't speak, becoming the mouthpiece of the gods, and he's the one who's supposed to be communicating. I thought it was great. With that being said, I come to my first very, very minor criticism of this book so far. For the most part, Jobie does an incredible job with the dialogue between the characters and differentiating the different types of characters that are speaking and how they speak. However, I do notice every once in a while that the communication and the dialogue between characters tends to take the same characteristics. What I mean is, it's imperative to an author and to the readers, when you're reading about dialogue between two characters, that you give each character a distinctive voice and tendencies that they use, you know, maybe like a tick or a move or a certain gruffness or something like that, to differentiate, to give each character a different voice, so that when you as a reader are reading it, you are reading it really in different voices. But I tend to find myself while I'm reading it that some of the characters at certain points seem to speak the same vocabulary, same tendencies. There's no difference in the manner in which they're speaking. And it's only in a few parts, and it's very, very short, and it does not detract at all from the story. It's just, you know, a fair explanation as to what I'm thinking when I'm reading it, and that's just one very, very minor criticism that I have so far, and it's honestly the only one that I can find. So when we first meet Pax, he's described as a mute who's unable to speak unless he's projecting images through either tactile touching people or projecting it into their mind in order to carry on a communication and dialogue. However, a little bit later on, we discover that he believes that he has the ability to speak, but he's fearful to actually use it. So what ends up happening is Raven wants to test this, and he wants to see him speak. So Pax does this. He begins to speak, and it ends up nearly killing Raven. It reminds me of the Marvel character Black Bolt, who's able to crack planets with his voice. But as he's speaking, it nearly kills Raven. But still, at the same time, it is described as enchanting and a beautiful voice that makes you almost become hypnotized by it, and it still nearly kills him. Luckily, he's indestructible, so we're led to believe so far, but he ends up being just fine. But something leads me to believe that, of course, like I said, Raven is the last living person in the group before this tribe, so I don't think they're as indestructible as they believe they are, or being led to believe they are. Something really interesting happens in this part of the book where Zach has talked about it previously, that he's tried to get down to a basement level of the base, but he's unable to get to a door. But Christian believes that he can use his abilities to get through the door because of what happened in Vegas with the slot machines. So they go downstairs and they try to get through the door, and of course they do, and they discover a plethora of amazing artifacts and shrines and weapons and equipment and all sorts of things. But the thing that really got me here is that in each there's little sections with an eternal flame glowing, where previous tribes and members of tribes have shrines devoted to them. And in one of them, Raven is with his tribe, and throughout the story, he's changed into different characters at certain different points. And one of the people he becomes is a beautiful redheaded woman covered in tattoos, and we see her in this picture as well. Now, it's not 100% sure yet because Jobie hasn't gone into exactly what happens with this group, but I'm led to believe that some of them are dead, and he's the only living one of his tribe. And this makes me believe that they're not as indestructible as they're being told at this point. Now, before Christian decided to go with Raven to Las Vegas, we're reminded of the dream he had of one of the settler girls who he believes is basically his soulmate. Well, like I said, it comes into play, and it comes into play today. A new character, the last part of the tribe, comes in, and it just so happens to be Lexi, and I called it. She is the settler girl who he's been dreaming about. And I've got to say, there's two aspects of this that I absolutely love. First of all, the character is great. I love the way she describes her. When she first comes in, she says that she's basically a warrior princess from what Raven said. But those weren't his words, but that's the way she sees it. And she is a warrior, she's a badass, and when she learns how to use her abilities to train, she basically tells a story of who she is, who her parents are, where she came from, while she's fighting Raven and whooping his butt. And I thought it was great. The other aspect that I absolutely love is the connection that Christian feels with her, and we're led to believe she feels with him as well based on her reactions towards him. Now, I've read some other reviews that don't exactly love the idea of a love issue going on in the book when so much else is going on, but I gotta tell you, I think it fits perfectly. Because we are talking about a younger person. He's about 18, she's in her 20s. And something that you have to remember, when I know when I was that age, you got to remember that first love that we as people have. We've all been there. We've all met that person where we thought it was the end all be all, fell madly in love and convinced that the rest of our lives we were going to be with this person. And I think it's a great coming of age for him, even if it's not what we're led to believe to be his soulmate, but he's still coming, it's still a coming of age and becoming used to his powers, which he's still struggling with. And I think that having the introduction of a character who he's falling in love with and doesn't even know yet fits perfectly in the idea of a young adult coming of age and having those feelings for somebody who it might be the first time. I thought it was a really great addition to the story, and I think it fits perfectly. Once we meet Lexi, we move into the climactic part of this section of the book. And while they're talking and having discussions, they go back up to their room, the level where their room is on, and apparently it's in chaos and people are running around and there's confusion and there's anxiety going on, and they meet a character that none of them have ever seen before, but they're talking about a horrible event that just happened, and they run to the TV where Zach is already watching it, and apparently in London the Parliament building was blown up, and we have no idea exactly what's going on. We don't know who did it. We don't know why, but we're led to believe it has something to do with this struggle between the settlers and human society, which is strange because Lexi's father was just elected to Parliament, which she shows concern, but he ends up being alive, which is an interesting take. I'm really curious to see where Jobie's going to take this one. It's really interesting to see how she's going to work that into the story, and I'm excited to find out how, because here's Lexi, and she's a member of this group who's protecting human society against the settlers, and she is a settler, and her father just happens to be a very powerful settler. So it's a very intricate web that's being woven right here, and I can't wait to see what happens with that storyline. With the Parliament building being blown up, and we're led to believe that it has something to do with the struggle between the settlers and the protection that needs to be done by them, the tribe, with the human society. They go ahead and they travel to to Oxford in the UK, and they end up going to Christian's uncle's house, Uncle Simon, and that's where they're going to be basing their basic operations from day to day. And this is where I finished up my session today, and I thought it was a pretty good closing. They went to Simon, and Simon is different than the rest of his family, and someone who Christian actually feels a connection with rather than his mother and his father, which when they arrive at Simon's estate, everybody calls their family to try to explain to them what they're doing and what's going on. And everybody but Lexi has an explanation because they're at Oxford, and they basically all say that they were invited to attend school at Oxford, but Lexi already graduated from Oxford, so she has to come up with a different excuse. And when Christian calls his mother to explain what's going on, she really didn't care, going on to tell him that what she's going to be doing and everything that she has planned, and doesn't really pay attention to anything that he has to say. And when he cuts her off and says that he might be attending a class in Oxford and hangs up on her, that's the end of that. But I like the connection that he has with Simon, and I think it could be interesting to see where it goes. And that's where I stopped today's reading session, and I am looking forward to getting back to it tomorrow. Picking up where we left off right after they get to Simon's estate. Christian apparently has some trouble sleeping that night, so he goes out to this aged tree where he spent a lot of his time growing up, where his uncle created this tire swing, and he goes out there to try to just think a little bit, and Lexi ends up joining him there. And This is where Jobie shows a little bit of that first love connection, where they start talking and telling each other how they feel, and the emotions come from that, and it's a nice little scene where you get to see that both sides both have affection for each other and they both share it with each other. And then they end up going to sleep, and the next morning wakes up and they're getting ready to go to classes, and they're attending classes at Oxford. The reason they're doing this is we found out earlier in the book that the settlers have been using universities, classes, students, and influential youth in order to recruit new people. We don't know why yet, but in order to get in with them, they're attending classes at the university to try to get in with it. And when Christian goes downstairs in the morning, he discovers Lexi went without him, which kind of hurts his feelings, and he thinks that, well, maybe the connection wasn't as strong as he feels or hopes it was. We do get a chance here to get more information on one of the other main characters, Kai. Now, Kai and Christian end up walking together to go to classes, but this time is spent where they talk a little bit, and Kai tells him a little bit about her past, and we find out why she has such a hatred towards the settlers. It turns out a few years back, she created a video game, and she got incredible acclaim from it, and she was offered, I'm guessing a scholarship to attend a school, but what ends up happening is this settler named Seth Craven ends up creating a crusade against the game. And with all the uproar he creates, the university that she was given a scholarship to rescinds the offer, and additionally the gaming company who was going to make her game rescinds their offer as well. So she loses everything because of the settler Seth Craven, and her life is basically in turmoil when she gets picked up by the tribe and ends up going to the desert facility and meet Zach, whom she falls in love with. And the problem is, it appears Zach doesn't feel the same way about her. We do learn something very important, in my opinion, about the entire storyline at this point, where after Kai tells him that she loves Zach, he comes back in his mind and tells us as the readers that many years have passed since this conversation took place, and where he is in his life now, he would have handled what he did next and differently. Now, this tells us that this is Christian telling the story many years in the future, retelling the story about the past. What he ends up doing is, after she says that she loves Zach and doesn't think Zach loves her back, instead of comforting her or saying something effective, he gets up, pats her on the back, and leaves. Something that Jobie has discussed a little bit before is talking about Christian's intellectual ability, and talks about him being on a genius level. And it's something that he has kind of fought against in his life, to portray himself in a different light as the rebel, we could say. But he decides to take a class on poetry, and through the class he ends up enjoying it actually, and he's approached by a settler directly after the lesson named Alex. And Alex invites him to have coffee with several other of his classmates to continue discussing the lecture from the class. And at first he wants to stick to that rebel that he is and say no, but he ends up deciding to go, which is pivotal for what happens next. Is the whole purpose of this was to be invited by settlers to join their groups, and this is exactly what happens. Afterwards, Alex invites him to join him at a place where they deal with the homeless and runaway children. And Christian, of course, obliges and says, you know what, I'm going to end up going. So when Alex returns back to Uncle Simon's estate, he ends up telling the tribe that he was invited on his first day, which ends up happening with everybody except for Lexi. But it makes sense because she's a settler and they're out trying to recruit humans, so it really makes sense. So while they're all going their separate ways to these different meetings, Lexi ends up going with Christian. And when they go there, they start paying attention, start listening to Alex, and Alex is talking to, the runaways and the homeless and trying to, put his spin on things, and, global warming and pollution and taking care of the earth and so on and so forth. But he also flirts with Lexi, which drives Christian crazy. But it ends up being something that Lexi says that they can use to further their agenda and use it against Alex. I'm looking at my notes here. Now, when they get back to Simon's house and Lexi ends up going up to go to sleep, Christian goes outside and lets Laz take over his abilities and goes absolutely crazy and smashes into a garage where Uncle Simon has some pretty spectacularly amazing vehicles and ends up smashing and destroying a Bentley. And I don't know about anybody else, but just reading that pissed me off. If I were Uncle Simon, whew, I don't know what I would do, but I would be pissed. So unsure of his dealings with Lexi, Christian decides he needs some help. And we get reintroduced to a character who I am glad is reintroduced, which is Ben. Christian wakes up, he calls Ben, tells him his problem, and Ben says, I'm on my way, and he ends up showing up. He ends up showing up right when the rest of the tribe, they're all training and practicing. And he shows up, and the tribe is pretty pissed to find out that Ben knows about Christian, and they're all uneasy about the entire event of Ben being there and now knowing their secret. So they get into this conversation, and they're trying to decide what to do with him, and Ben convinces them that he is there to help, and there's no reason to be upset with him. But Zach especially doesn't like him because of a connection, because Ben is like a video game guy and an internet guy, and it knows right away who Kai is, and he's a little jealous about that, which is an interesting twist on events. But Zach decides that in order to test him, they're going to make him go out into the field, break into Alex's runaway shelter, and see what kind of information he can obtain. Now, this is one part of the book that I didn't exactly love. I mean, it doesn't take away from the story, but I didn't love this. I think Jobie could have done something a little bit different than the way she went with it. But basically, Ben calls and hires some mercenaries because it turns out he won the lottery. I think there could have been a more creative way in order to show him obtaining this money. Maybe he did a massive job against somebody and obtained a large quantity of money, stole something, or even inherited from a dead relative or something along those lines. I thought would have been a much more creative way of him obtaining the money, but either way it happens. And what they do is he goes with two mercenaries into Alex's shelter, and when he's in there, he's playing around, joking around, showing himself in the mirror, looking for things, and not really taking it very seriously because he's having a lot of fun with it because he wants to be a member of the tribe and he thinks he's already belonging. So all of a sudden, some settler goons show up and charge into the building, and they have to get him out. But one of the agreements was if he gets caught, he's not going to be allowed in. And they can't help him, but Christian's like, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. So through Pax, they get him to go to the roof, and he jumps off the roof, and using Laz's power, Christian guides him down, and they end up leaving with him. But the only thing that he finds is a pamphlet, which on the back is a picture of Seth Craven. And at the time, Christian really doesn't care and crumbles it up and throws it away, but it ends up being something pretty serious. So the next day comes along, and Lexi and Christian end up walking to school together and decide to have a picnic lunch, a nice romantic sweet picnic lunch after class, and which they do end up going, and Christian has been given this advice from Ben on how to address his emotions, his feelings, and to not scare her off, which he totally doesn't do and ends up telling her that he loves her. But surprisingly enough, she responds in kind. And then they have a little makeout session, and then they go back to class and meet up after class again, in which she finally tells him that she's going to go visit her family, her mother and father, because, her father almost got blown up in the building, Parliament, and ends up, Christian's a little upset with it, and of course the tribe does not like it because they already don't trust her, and they think that she's going to go talk to her parents, and maybe she's part of a bigger conspiracy and got into the group and shouldn't be there, but we find out that's not the case either. Lexi comes back after her weekend with her family, highly agitated, really upset, and ends up calling the tribe together in order to tell them the story about everything that happened over the weekend. And apparently, while she was home, she told her parents about her new human friends, and they, as she went away to go refill some drinks and came back, she was eavesdropping and heard her parents talking about their cautiousness towards these new humans, about how Either they were going to maybe try to be her friend to influence something about her father, Echo is his name, his new position in Parliament, or what Echo thinks it is his more covert operations, which Lexi has never heard of before and has no idea what he's talking about. So he explains to her that he's got, business obligations in Oxford, and he would love to come visit with them. And when she tells the group all this, the group is like, okay, you know what? We should work this, and we should have him come visit and find out what his business obligations are, and figure out what's going on with that whole thing. Lexi ends up inviting her father to come visit for the day, and he comes down and he visits, and they decided as a group to get him in on the secret of Pax's ability, able to communicate telepathically. And he gets a phone call, which he steps away, and of course they go to eavesdrop, and Pax is the one who does it and listens in on the conversation. And it ends up being Seth Craven, the same Seth Craven who ruined Kai's gaming career, and is telling him about Pax's ability. And of course this sets them all on edge, and everybody gets nervous and everything like that. And he comes back and says he has to go. He has a business obligation, a business meeting that he has to attend, and asks Lexi to walk him out. And as they're walking out, he asks Lexi to come with him to a major meeting and take minutes for him. And of course, she's super excited, and this is jump-starting events that are about to get a little crazy. Lexi goes to meet with her father, Echo, to go to this meeting, and Christian and Pax and Zach end up going and sneaking in, utilizing Zach's ability to put a shield over them so they can't be seen, in order to eavesdrop and find out more about what's going on in the entire situation, but also to be there as backup for Lexi in case they need to get her out. While they're in the meeting, actually right before the meeting, they go up to the rooftop and they end up finding this hexagonal box, like an elevator, the same thing that they found in the basement back at the facility in the desert. Well, Christian, for some reason, doesn't like it and puts his hand up and melts it and destroys it. So this plays a big part in what's coming up, but we don't know that yet. So they go back down the elevator and they go to the meeting where the meeting's taking place, and they get there just about as Echo starts the meeting. And he starts talking about how it's their job to, and I'm just looking here, he discusses how events are going faster than they expected, and natural disasters and pollution and global warming are farther along and creating effects that need to be stopped as soon as possible. And we find out what their plan is, and their plan is a slow plan to get these sympathizers in college and the younger people and ingrain upon them to certain changes that need to happen to society in order to not have what happened to their home planet, which was destroyed by the same thing, pollution, global warming and stuff like that, and put them in positions of power so in like 20 years they will be in the position to make changes. But things are happening so fast, they're not sure if that's going to be the effective way of doing it. It's at this point that Echo turns the meeting over to Seth Craven. And Seth Craven begins to explain his plan, which is to take a more aggressive, extreme approach to create a natural disaster that has global implications and will get everybody's attention without drawing attention to the settlers themselves. And we don't really know what his idea is yet, but it has something to do on a global scale that's going to be pretty massive to get everybody's attention. And this is also the point where he explains that he and his group, his extremist people, were the ones who blew up Parliament. At which point the people around the table are quite upset and call in for guards to arrest him. The only problem is the goons that come in are under Seth's control and end up killing two of the protesters that are calling for his arrest. Christian, Zach, and Pax know that they need to get Lexi out of there in a hurry to get her to safety because this Seth is nuts. So Christian ends up darting away from the shield and ends up going to a fire alarm pole and pulls it, activating the alarm, creating chaos as he runs back to the group and hides under the shield. And Lexi and Echo end up escaping in the chaos, but for some reason, somehow, Seth is able to pick out exactly where they are, and the goons converge on them, which ends up being this huge fight, and they end up running through the building and end up being chased and end up having to fight, in which Zach ends up having to defend the group, and he uses his guide and ends up killing some of the goons that are after them and doesn't mean to, which now makes two of the group have already killed people at this point, which is Christian and now Zach. They end up getting away, but Pax ends up getting badly injured. Apparently, each of the tribe, each of them have a weakness. And in Pax's case, when he turned into his guardian fully, he has wings like a bird or an angel. And he ends up getting one of his wings badly shot up. And instead of being able to heal normally, he's not going to be able to heal because this is one of his weaknesses. One of his guide's most powerful aspects is being able to fly, and now he can't. So they end up getting him to the roof, at which point, using the shield and forming it into sort of a glider between Zach's shield and Laz's ability to control the wind and the weather, Christian gets them off and back down to the ground. One thing I forgot to mention is one of the goons that are chasing after him, one of them who survives and doesn't end up dying, is a settler named Devin. And during one of the confrontations, Devin ends up telling Christian to let Raven know that Devin is alive. And we don't know why yet, we don't know what's going on yet, but I'm led to believe it's going to be something pivotal. When they get back to Uncle Simon's estate, they start caring for Pax, and Uncle Simon pulls Christian aside and says, "We need to talk." And he explains that he's actually working for the government and kind of as a spy in sort of espionage sort of thing, MI6. We're not 100% sure, but he's under strict orders from the government to protect the tribe and help them in any way possible. So it's a little bit of a turn, because earlier in the book, as sort of an excuse, Christian and Raven end up telling him that they work for the government, which obviously Simon didn't really buy because he was already under orders to help protect them. So we move on to the point where Lexi and Echo return, and of course Lexi runs over to, comfort Pax and see what's going on, and everybody then turns their attention to Echo. With all their attention turned on him, at this point Echo understands that he's got to be completely honest with the tribe to earn back their trust. So he now tells the real truth about who the settlers really are. Now we're led to believe at this point that the settlers are aliens from a different world and they're different people. Well, it ends up being that settlers are actually from Earth future 2945, and they're living in a world of apocalyptic, horrible conditions. They can't live outside. They have to live in these domes because the world that we know of, they can't be outside. It's completely destroyed with pollution, and they can't be outside of the dome. So they come back to try to fix it before it gets to that point. Now get this, Albert Einstein was one of them. He was one of the first. He was the one who actually created the time traveling device in order for them to come back. And remember the hexagonal box that I was talking about earlier, the one that Christian destroyed on the roof? Yeah, that's the machine, how they got back and forth. And it ends up being that there's still that one in the facility in the desert, so they can still come back. But remember that guy Jason who got shot in the face in Las Vegas, in the box that was stolen? In order for that machine to work, that machine needs that box. So now we have no idea where this box is, but it's the only way to make that device work. Echo then goes on to explain that he's going to go back to London the next day and try to talk Seth into not doing this plan, not doing things the way he was planning on doing, and trying to find a better way rather than killing millions of people. And they agree, sure, go ahead, no problem, do that. And the next day when they wake up and Christian goes downstairs, he discovers that Lexi is gone. And she went with her dad Echo to try to convince Seth not to do his plan. And through Pax, they communicate with her and they're talking to her. They find out what's going on, and everything's good, everything's going fine. And they're sitting at the table and Ben is telling bad jokes. And right when Christian's about to tell him to stop, something happened and Laz takes over and is in a complete and ridiculous rage, just wants to destroy everything. And I love the entire scene where they're trying to get him out the door, and Christian is trying to fight it, but he can't because Laz is completely taken over, and they finally get him outside. And he goes into his rage, and he's just going crazy. And we find out soon thereafter that the reason he's going crazy is he found out through Pax that Lexi and Echo were taken prisoner by Seth, and it was before Christian was able to realize it, and Laz just took over and went nuts. So now, crazy with rage, Christian tells everybody to stay here. He's going to London to rescue them, but they are not coming. None of the other parts of the tribe were coming with them. So Uncle Simon gives him a Mercedes in which he goes and he starts driving to London. And all of a sudden, as he's, on his way, Pax and Ben pop up from the back seat, and they stowed away and they came along with him. And of course, the rest of the tribe is really irate about this, but he tells them to stay. They're going to keep them updated and let them know what's going on. So they finally get to where they're being held, and they get through the building. Really, really great storytelling here. I'm not going to get into it because there might be a couple spoilers, but just great storytelling by Jobie, and something that just was very well written. And when they finally get to Lexi and Echo, it's a trap. And Seth used them in order to lure whoever was going to come rescue him, and it ends up being one of the people that he wanted, which was Pax. This is the point where we finally learn Seth's master plan. His plan is to take Pax and Lexi. Mainly, those are the two main important ones because of Pax's ability to use sound to create damage to things, and Lexi's powerful ability to amplify his power. Go to Antarctica, go to an ice shelf, and use his ability to break off this huge, massive chunk of ice into the ocean, which will melt and which will cause a cataclysmic event of sea rising and destroy cities along the coast throughout the entire world, killing millions probably. And he ends up taking Christian, Pax, Lexi, and Echo to Antarctica, but as soon as they're out of this room that they're in is a metal room where they can't get any communications out, but as soon as they're outside of this room, Pax sends a message telling the entire tribe to meet them up in Antarctica. And Seth brings them to Antarctica, and this is where the main climax of the entire book happens. They get to Antarctica to this ice shelf, and there's several bunkers, and one of them is the one where Seth and Devin and a couple of other goons take Echo, Christian, and Ben. And when Lexi and Pax are out on the ice trying, and of course Seth is threatening to kill Echo, which makes them actually do this, Pax ends up using his subsonic voice in order to break apart the ice shelf, and using Lexi to amplify his ability. Now, what Christian does is, because he can control the elements, he begins to lower the temperature out on the ice shelf. And the scientists inside the bunker begin to register that the temperature dropped 10 degrees, 15 degrees, and discover that it's Christian who's doing it. And as soon as Seth finds out Christian's the one doing it, he shoots Echo in the stomach. And this creates chaos, of course, but at this point, it appears that maybe Seth is having a change of heart or having issues with what he's doing, and it's just a crescendo of reaching the climax of the entire book. And the emotion in that scene up to that point is exceptionally written. Just really grips you, and you know you're coming to the climax, and you have to read more, and that's what I did. So as the ice shelf is breaking apart and parts of it are cascading into the ocean below, Pax decides he can't finish the job he started. He can't watch and he can't be a part of it. So he sends a subliminal message to Christian telling him to take care of the tribe, take care of their family, and make sure that they're all taken care of. And Christian darts out the door, runs towards him, because he knows what Pax is about to do, and he jumps into the chasm between the ice shelf and jumps to his death. So much for being immortal. So now Pax is dead. So I'm not sure if he's dead, but he jumped to his death. We don't really find out if he's actually dead, but we're led to believe he's dead. And Lexi and Christian run back into the bunker where her father was just shot in the stomach. And Seth grabs Ben, one of the goons grabbed Ben and said, "We're leaving, peace out." And as they're leaving, Ben fights against the goon, gets his gun away, and ends up killing the goon, which, good for Ben. I'm so glad that he's part of this story, and I'm so glad that he was able to do something, because I love Ben. He's an awesome character. The goons end up locking the door to the bunker, but this is about where the big, epic, conclusive battle takes place. While they're trying to take care of Echo, Lexi and Christian decide it's time to fight. So Christian uses his powers to blow open the door, and big battle scene ensues. He's able to shoot fire from his hands, and Seth and his people have armored vehicles and tanks, and they end up blowing it up. Christian uses his manipulation of elements to bring a tidal wave, a huge wave, to come wash these goons out to sea with their equipment. And but Devin is still there and ends up showing up. And just as Christian is about to meet his doom with Devin in this tank, the cavalry shows up. That's right, the tribe has finally arrived. Personally, I think one of the best aspects of this entire final battle scene is the huge fight between Raven and Devin. There's so much emotion, so much rage, so much history involved in this fight. This one fight is worth reading the whole book. And Christian had been shot in the stomach, but he isn't going to die from that because that's not his weakness. But Raven and Devin battle and fight, and it's just the best part of the entire scene. Of course, the heroes emerge victorious, but the ice shelf is still cracking and still falling into the sea. They have to do something. Christian and Lexi work together in order to amplify Laz's power to refreeze the ice shelf, but Lexi's attention is still on her father, who was shot in the stomach and who's dying. So what ends up happening is she has to make a choice to either help Christian save the world or help Kai save her father. And of course she ends up helping Christian while Kai tries to save her father, but her attention is back on her father. So Christian, in order to have to get her to use her power strong enough, has to say some pretty controversial things, in my opinion, to get her angry, which is clever, but it's interesting exchange, something that I actually enjoyed reading, that I actually think that Jobie could have gone a little bit further with, but I really like the way that it happened and the way it concluded. And it shows the emotional bond between them. The only problem is, once they're able to actually fix the ice shelf, Echo doesn't make it. And Christian is convinced it's going to be the reason she can never forgive him, and they'll never be the same as they were before. With the battle finally done and the big epic conclusion, and Pax is dead and Echo is dead, they end up going back to their desert fortress, and Raven tells them it's time for them to go home and recover and recuperate from the events of the entire book at this point. And of course, some of them don't want to go, some of them are more than willing to go. And Christian ends up going. He ends up going home and seeing his mother, and his mother, he's happy to see her, hugs her, and just really excited to actually be able to see her. And it's at this point where we discover that his mother's engaged to some new guy named Gordon. Now, I don't know for sure because I haven't read further in Jobie's new book, but I'm led to believe this character is going to be pretty damn important. We don't know who he is because we don't meet him, but I'm willing to bet it might even be, Seth or somebody who works for Seth. I'm really interested to see where they're going with this one. So frustrated with his mother's new fiance and the whole escapade with that, Christian decides to go visit Ben, who he hasn't been able to get in contact with in days, but it's played off where he has really bad cell reception at his parents' house, so maybe he's at his flat, and he decides, I'm just going to go to his flat and check it out. So he rides the bus and he goes to his flat, and when he gets there, Ben's upstairs neighbor tells Christian that Christian has a package in the lobby that she's going to buzz him in. I must point out that the entire time we don't know if Ben is there, and it's something that I picked up on right away, that he hasn't talked to Ben, so we don't know if he's there or not. And when he opens this package, it's a bomb. And this is a controversial aspect of many of Jobie's reviews on the book, which I personally love. And I love cliffhangers. I thought this was a great way to end the book. But as Ben tries to get out of the building, there's not enough time and the bomb explodes. Christian wakes up in the hospital surrounded by both of his parents, Uncle Simon and Lexi. And it's at this point that we discover that there were no survivors in the building to the bomb. We know of 2 people who died for sure, which is the upstairs cat lady and another one of Ben's neighbors. But nobody's able to find Ben's body. Now, like I said before, I personally believe Ben was not there because I think he's too pivotal of a character to take out at this point. And I don't think Jobie killed him. I think something else happened with him. But Christian at this point understands that somebody tried to blow him and Ben up. So he says there's no happy ending to this one, and they have to find out who did it, especially if it was Seth. And he rips out his IV fluid, his IVs, he rips them out, grabs Lexi, and they storm out of the room. And that is where the book ends. And that concludes my review and outline of the entire book. This should not come as a surprise, but this book I give the full 5 bicep review. This book was incredible from start to finish. So well written. The characters were so well rounded. The settings, the emotion, every aspect of this book, from the twists and turns to the connection between the tribe, to every aspect of this book was just incredible. I loved everything about it. And there were parts that I was a little bit worried and concerned about that Jobie ended up twisting into a way that worked perfectly for the book. It is no surprise that this gets the 5 bicep review. People, go get this book. This book is so worth the read. And as of the recording of this video in mid-January, Jobie's next book in the series, Flack, it just came out. So if you're just watching this review when I post it, make sure that you get both books. Hell, even if it's a year from now, get both books. Hopefully the 3rd one will be out by then. This series is so well written. Jobie is an exceptional writer. Get this book. I can't recommend it enough. This is one of the better books that I've read in recent years. I love this series, and I will be singing Jobie's praises for the foreseeable future. That being said, it's time to say goodbye to Jobie's books and move on to my next series. You can follow me over on Cardio Book Reviews. The link will be down in the description. Over on Facebook, where I talk about the books that I'm reviewing. I give little snippets into my mentality and what I think about what I'm reading so far. I want to get you in the conversation. Join us over there. Be involved in the conversation. Read the book that I'm reading. Talk to me about what you think at the same points that I'm at. I would love to hear your feedback. And make sure that you follow Jobie in all the places: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course follow me as well. You can find me at TheJeffRock on all the places: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And make sure that you like this video and hit the subscribe button so you never miss a review, because there's going to be more of them. Now, I'm glad to spend the time with you here today. I hope you did enjoy the video. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and say this now that I say in all the closing of all my videos. If you're on a journey to weight loss or to better yourself or to be a more healthy lifestyle, you are worth the blood, sweat, and tears it's going to take to reach that new healthy lifestyle. So get out there and start today. Pick up Jobie's book while you do your cardio and read it and enjoy the story. So until next time, people, peace out.